Hello, I'm McWilliam. I developed the routines-based interview, and I'm here to encourage you to use it in Oklahoma, as I do in other places. Why is the RBI so important? The first thing the RBI can do for early intervention is to bring us focus on functionality of our plans. The RBI helps families to identify the things that their children and they themselves, the parents, really need in everyday life. The second reason the RBI is so important is that it identifies family-level needs. That is, the needs that the parents have to be able to accomplish what they want to do as parents and as family members of other members of the family. That's why the RBI fits very well the latest guidance from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act on family assessment. A third reason for doing the RBI is that it provides context for our assessment and then intervention. By definition, the routines-based interview is structured according to families' routines. So families' routines are those eco-cultural niches, as anthropologists call them, where things happen in families. They're the times of day where family life gets carried out, including child functioning gets carried out. So by interviewing families about their everyday routines organized by routines and in sufficient detail to really get what's going on, we can get a good idea of the functioning, in other words, its assessment, and it helps the family to identify where it is that they might want things to change, where and when. In other words, the context. The fourth reason that the RBI is so important is that it results in a plan that then becomes the backbone for home visits and other community-based visits, the actual interventions themselves. In some ways, the plan itself is really not what's important. What's important is a plan that can drive services that actually work for children and families. When you do an RBI, you end up with a large number of outcomes or goals, which then should drive how home visits and other intervention times proceed. And if those outcomes or goals are actually functional needs for the child and for the family, then it's going to make the home visits that much richer. They will no longer be professionally driven visits where the professionals go in and do goofy activities with children, but instead they will be true consultative visits that are really aimed at actual needs that families have identified. The identification of needs is an important thing to think about here because many early interventionists are interested in finding out what families want, and so they use well-meaning but rather ineffective methods for assessing families' needs. Primarily what they do is they ask families, what do you want to happen? Well, this is actually a very hard question for families to answer in sufficient detail to develop a plan that can then be used for 6 months. So the RBI really just helps structure the conversation for families, so then when at the end of the RBI you say, okay, what would you like to work on, they can come up with a number of child level and family level things that they would like to change. The last thing I want to mention about the importance of the RBI is that it provides a meaningful method for families to participate in the development of the IFSP, or IEP actually, because the RBI can be used for preschool also. When you watch an RBI going on, or do one, you see that the family is talking much more than the professional is talking. The family is giving all the information, the professional summarizes what the family has said, and then the family picks what they want to work on. It sounds simple, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. The important point that I'm making here is families are talking. And we're talking about all kinds of families. That sometimes we have families who don't have a lot of education or don't have a lot of confidence or who culturally often don't speak in meetings, but the RBI is designed to elicit families' comfortable reporting of their everyday life. And if the RBI is done right, all families will do that. Most families love to talk about their family life, especially to somebody who seems friendly and interested and who they know is an expert. One of the issues about the RBI is that it is an evidence-based practice. This is important now. It's always been important, really, but IDEA requires that practices be evidence-based. We've done research ourselves with the routines-based interviews specifically and found it to produce more functional goals and more goals. In places where they are actually where the business as usual results in too many goals, the RBI has been found successful in bringing it down to a manageable number. And a manageable number, in our view, is 6 to 12 outcomes. And more often than not, it's more like 10, 11, or 12 outcomes. I've already mentioned about the family assessment part. This is really important for IFSP development and just for good work with families, whether you're using an IFSP in particular or not. And that is that a lot of assessment that gets done in our field is the assessment of the status of a person. For example, child assessments are often about whether children can do different skills and how those skills are related to other children of that child's age, that's norm referenced, or related to a list of things that somebody thought was important, that would be curriculum based. But it's about the status of the child. Well, the thing that we really need in any human service endeavor is meeting needs. So if we're going to meet needs, then we have to assess needs, not status, needs. And the RBI is a brilliant tool, if I do say so myself, for being able to assess the needs of families. Therefore, when you are assessing the needs of families, that follows the spirit and actually the letter of the law in family assessment. Family assessment, according to IDEA, is not supposed to be about making judgments about what kind of family it is. It's supposed to be assessing the needs that families identify or have. So doing the RBI is different from business as usual for many people. Many IFSPs have been developed without the RBI. It can be done quicker if you don't use the RBI. The issue about taking on this different way of doing things is that it's different, it's change. And as we know, most human beings are somewhat resistant to change. And they're afraid that this change is going to make life more difficult. With the RBI, specifically, people are afraid of the amount of time it takes. Some people are afraid of the fact that you are asking families about their day-to-day lives at a level of detail that we're not used to. So people are afraid of the so-called intrusiveness of the RBI. Actually, families don't see it that way at all. Families see it as people being truly interested. People are afraid that families will mention needs that they traditionally, that is the professionals traditionally, don't meet. So families might identify the fact that their housing is unsafe and that they really want to change housing. Some early intervention professionals will freak out with that because they say, we're not in the business of finding housing for families. Well, yes we are, because of service coordination and other supports that we give to families. The early intervention program itself might not be finding housing for families, but it's our ethical obligation, if we find out that families have a need like that, to hook the families up with resources who will address those family needs. Early intervention, unlike a lot of other services, unlike some medical services, unlike educational services, is designed to bring together resources to help families get their needs met. So when people are afraid that the RBI is going to open up the door to too many needs being identified, that is exactly what we want to happen. There's no such thing as too many needs being identified in early intervention. So this fear of change then leads people to start identifying what's wrong with the RBI, which is fine. That is a natural reaction to people worrying about doing things differently. But I'd like to throw a slightly different perspective on this. One is that what the RBI does is it gives professionals an opportunity to spend 2 hours with each family. Devoting 2 hours to a family is not, in my opinion, over-serving a family. In fact, if you read the criticisms of Part C services in the United States, more often than not, people are complaining about underserving children and families. I actually don't think that usually we do, because families are actually providing the interventions to their children most of the time. But I do think maybe we don't spend enough time listening to families, especially when we're first getting to know them and when we're trying to plan out what we're going to do for the next 6 months or year. So I'm saying 2 hours for a family. This is hardly too much to devote to a family. And you know, the thing is that those 2 hours can be life-changing for families. They've told us this. They've said that was a life-changing event for me. And you know, it might be for you too. When people first start doing the RBI, they are blown away by the kind of information that you get and the kind of plan that you result with. Furthermore, they're blown away by the fact that within that 2 hour time, a bond has been established with the family that is quite remarkable for a one-time event. I have to say that I still fall in love with every family member that I interview. And it's about interviewing. I know about home visiting also and other contacts that we have with families, but it's something about the routines-based interview. There's a structure to it that's been very carefully crafted over many years and much trial and experimentation to really figure out the best ways of beginning the interview, going through the day, and ending the interview. And it is a time that lets you, I'll speak for myself, that lets me really appreciate the resilience of families, their humor, and their love for their children. So why would you not want to give yourself the gift of having that experience with every family in early intervention? Go forth and do RBIs. They're a good thing, they're fun, and they work.